Miraculous end to another blood libel. Meanwhile, the priest sent out special messengers to all the Christians in the town and surrounding villages, calling them to a special service for the next day, Sunday. A huge assembly gathered in the church, anxious to hear what their Holy Father had to say to them. In a long and rambling sermon, he again reminded them that they must know that the Jews use Christian blood for their matzahs on Passover. He also reminded them that it was now over a week since a Christian child had disappeared, and he had no doubt whatsoever that this was the work of the wicked Jews. He spoke in heartbroken tones, saying he was a sick man due to this terrible event, but that because of the importance of his having to address them, he had come to church instead of staying in bed at home. His soul-stirring eloquence was unexpectedly cut short by a commotion at the back of the church, and every eye turned to see who was responsible for the interruption. They saw a peasant coming forward, calling to the priest as he advanced that he had brought an important message for him. The priest, unsuspecting, allowed the man to come forward. The peasant then, in a loud, ringing tone, spoke up. "Father," he called out, "I have come from a friend of mine from my village. A few days ago, he suddenly became unaccountably ill and died. But before his death, he called me and begged me to take this message to you. He said, 'Tell the priest that I did all he told me to, and I want to remind him of his promise that when I die, I will go straight to heaven. Tell him that I kidnapped that Christian child, exactly as he told me to, and that he is still safely in hiding at my brother's house. So you see, I came without delay, as I promised my dying friend I would.'" The priest was taken completely by surprise. What was he to do with this stupid peasant who had no more sense than to come blabbing right in the middle of the congregation this Sunday morning? Trying to appear calm and innocent, the priest burst out with words, "Throw this drunkard out of the church! How dare he come disturbing the holiness of the service!" The poor peasant was pounced upon from all sides, and beaten and bewildered, was bundled out of the church. When he reached the outside, he continued in bewildered tones to a crowd of people who had gathered around to see what was going on. "I don't know why the priest was angry with me. I only told him what my peasant friend asked me to tell him. Is it my fault that the Christian boy was kidnapped by my friend? The priest told him to do it, so why is he angry now when I tell him his orders were carried out? I don't understand it. Indeed, I don't." And the peasant shook his head and shrugged his shoulders as he brushed himself tidy again before going on his way. The peasant had not noticed that among the people listening with interest to his story was a policeman dressed in his Sunday clothes. This policeman, who incidentally was a friend of the Jews and had never believed the nonsense that the priest was spreading, that the Jews used the blood of a Christian child to mix into their Passover cakes, decided to follow the peasant to his village and look for the missing boy. He motioned to two of his friends to accompany him, and the three men walked at a distance behind the peasant. When they reached the village, they found that there was a commotion going on near a small peasant hut. They went up to ask what the trouble was and were told that the peasant who lived there had suddenly taken ill and without any warning had collapsed and died. The policeman and his two companions joined the villagers who were excitedly entering and leaving the hut, when to their astonishment they beheld the boy for whose disappearance and murder the Jews were being blamed. The policeman experienced a double sense of relief and satisfaction. He was genuinely glad to be able to help his Jewish friends and prove the false priest a liar and a rogue, and it pleased him to think that he had been successful as a detective, which would probably mean promotion for him in his job. Meanwhile, in the city of Lyuzhna, the priest continued to keep up the appearance of innocent indignation and was urging his flock to join him in a house-to-house search of the Jews for the missing boy. The Jews, hearing of this, knew it could result in only one thing: a massacre. They decided to assemble in the Beis HaMedrash and prayed to the Almighty that a miracle might even at this late hour occur, which would prove their innocence and save them from a horrible death. The policeman and his two friends had now reached the office of the chief of police, taking the boy whom they had found in the village with them. The chief of police immediately conducted this party to the center of the marketplace and sent word to the prison warden to release the two wrongly charged and arrested Jews. Within a few moments, the two Jews appeared with a policeman at either side of them. Someone happening to see them jumped to the natural conclusion that they were being led to their death. So the rumor reached the Rav at the shul that the two Jews had been sentenced to death and were on their way to the Beis HaMedrash, accompanied by the police. The truth, of course, was that the chief of police had decided to publicly announce in the marketplace that the Jews were all innocent. The Christian child had been hidden by peasants on the instructions of the priest. It was entirely untrue to say that the Jews used Christian blood in their Passover cakes. He warned everyone that whoever would dare lay a hand on a Jew would be punished. He further announced that the two Jews were free, and to show his goodwill, he was going to accompany them to the synagogue and make an official and public apology to the Rav and all the leaders of the Jewish community for the wrong done them all by the false charges brought against them. When they reached the Beis HaMedrash, one of the Balabatim immediately approached the chief of police, and without giving him a chance to utter a word, immediately began pleading with him to allow them to daven mincha and say vidui before their death. The chief of police smiled at him, saying, "My friend, I have not come to do you any harm. Enough has been done you already. On the contrary, I have come to make a public apology to you all for the wrong and wicked charge brought against you. The missing child has been found by one of our policemen, and the blood libel has been proved a myth. I am taking all necessary steps to see that the Jews of Liozna will be properly protected. I have given warning that all who attempt to molest the Jews will be punished by hanging, so you should all now feel free to go on your way unmolested." When the priest heard that the Christian child had been brought back into town completely unharmed, and that the story was being told that he was at the bottom of the child's disappearance in order to bring trouble and death to the Jews, he tried to twist the matter around by saying that it was another plot on part of the wily Jews. They were afraid to bring the child back in the ordinary way, as that would prove their guilt in having kidnapped him. They had therefore bribed the policeman and his two companions to tell the story, and thus throw the blame on him, the priest. No sooner had the priest finished talking than he fell in a swoon near the altar from where he had been addressing his congregants. His confused flock rushed to his aid. He was carried home and put to bed, where he lay in terrible agony for 2 weeks, and then he died. Everyone, Jew and non-Jew, saw how every person connected with the frame-up against the Jews had come to a bad end. Rabbi Yekutiel, who told and retold this story, which Chaim Shimon always listened to as if he too were living through the terrors and joys of the Jews in the story, always ended by saying, "You probably think that this story happened long ago and could not possibly happen here. Well, you are wrong. Jews always lived through terrible times and will do so again. The difference, however, lies in their reaction to the troublesome times. In those days, whenever Jews found they had to face trouble, their immediate reaction was to apply self-analysis, see wherein they had sinned, and try to repent and improve their character. Nowadays, though, if Jews are faced with trouble and disaster, they do not first pray to God to help them, but turn to so-called leaders to intercede for them with the governing powers, believing that there lay their salvation. How misguided are these present-day Jews? This is our misfortune." When Chaim Shimon talked about this matter with Avram at the Minsk Yeshiva, he told him that he had come to the conclusion, and Avram agreed, that while the circumstances might vary, the Jews would always experience times of difficulty and trouble, but there would always be the right kind of Jews, who would step forward in the emergency and save them from the impending disaster. Chaim Shimon and Avram both felt that they could learn much from Yekutiel's story, as well as from their own unforgettable experiences. The former was also greatly influenced by his third friend at the yeshiva, Yisrael.